The girl ran. Barefoot and clad only in a thin ceremonial robe, the girl ran. The shattered tiles and masonry did not slow her down. Despite their sharp edges, they could not even begin to nick her now impervious skin. Perhaps if they were blades of enchanted silver, but not as the mundane debris that they were. Even if they had managed to cut her, they would not have drawn blood from a body that no longer bled. And of course, she would not even have registered pain in her mind. Mere physical pain was nothing compared to what she felt now. It should have worked! It should have worked! She thought. And indeed, there was no reason why it should not have. The ritual had been perfectly planned. She had taken what she thought were adequate safety measures, and she had felt the power surging through her. The ritual spell should have worked. She was sure of it. And yet, she was running barefoot through a ruined place, one that had been filled with anticipation less than 2 hours ago. She did not even notice that she could see with perfect clarity indoor with all the lights out. She reached the throne room. The damage was not so severe here, so close to the casting chamber, but it was empty. No, that was the wrong word to use. The lavishly decorated chamber was never empty. It was watched around the clock by 4 knights of the palace guard, outfitted in the best equipment money could buy. Right now, all 4 of them lay on the ground, completely still. In other words, just like the people in the room she had just left. "Hello?" she called out, holding onto a faint glimmer of hope that she would get a reply. The silence dashed those hopes like spun glass. The despair which took its place was like a cold, clammy cloak of darkness settling down on her. It was only made worse when she opened the knight's visors and saw their blank, dead eyes staring out into nothing. She had known these men almost since birth. They had smiled warmly to her when they met her in the corridors. She had seen them rise through the ranks as she grew up. They might not have been family, but they were almost as close as her own kin. And now they were dead. The girl wanted to cry, but the tears would not come. Still, she was so distraught that she did not find that fact strange. As she continued on to the royal bedchamber, she went over the facts in her head once more. Less than a year ago, the mighty beings colloquially known as the demon gods had appeared out of nowhere, and they had immediately begun ravaging the lands of man. City after city was crushed, and those nations which had not already been destroyed by the 8 great kings and the demi-humans invasion which followed, were wiped out by the roving hordes of lesser demons which had spontaneously appeared in their master's wake or which had been drawn out of hiding by the presence of a powerful being to follow. Several nations attempted to attack the demon gods head-on. They were crushed for their trouble by the overwhelming power and numbers of their enemies. In fact, ill-advised attacks only made them weaker by squandering heroes and valuable treasures in piecemeal assaults against impossible odds. The futility of a direct confrontation led the nations of the world to seek out alternatives. Some of them walled themselves up in fortified cities, but those only drew the attention of the demon gods, who cracked the thick walls like eggshells and feasted in the terrified people within. Others chose to flee out of the path of the invasion, but quite often their only escape route ran through the demi-human nations, which was effectively suicide for most refugees. Desperation forced mankind to take creative measures to survive. There was a race that learned to tame wyverns and lived on high crystal pillars above the ground and its teeming hordes of demons. Others fled underground and became something other than human. Still others vanished into the forests, sailed across the lakes, and generally fled from the demon gods. The mage kingdom of Anmar, however, had chosen a solution which played to their strengths. They had recovered a tome of ancient lore said to contain a spell capable of allowing its caster to do anything. Although the arcane runes were difficult to understand, the promise it contained was enough for them to try and decode the ritual needed to cast the spell. The ritual required nearly 100 magic casters capable of third-tier spells. A feat few nations could match. They would channel their power through a central caster, who would then be able to use the gathered energy to do anything they wished, according to the tome. With the preparations for the ritual finished, all that was left was the central caster, who had just reached her father's bedroom. She knocked, but there was no reply. As fear built in her heart, the girl pushed the door, which opened without resistance. The room she saw beyond was furnished lavishly, its decorations fit for a king. Then again, it was appropriate, because this was a king's room after all. But the girl did not care about the fact that the room was almost intact, because just when the clouds shifted and the moonlight shone down on her worst fear, her father, the mage king of Anmar, lay still on the floor of his room. She did not need to look at his unmoving chest to know that he was dead. He had fallen so that his outstretched arm pointed toward the balcony, and there was a look of horror on his face. Part of the girl wanted to run away immediately. She did not want to know what he had seen. However, a morbid curiosity impelled her onward. She had an idea of what was going on, and soon she was filled with an irresistible urge to see what had happened. Slowly, step by step, she inched toward the balcony, and what she saw drove her to her knees. The city of Anmar was a magical metropolis. All its citizens knew minor magic, zero-tier spells, in the language of this world, and the way the city was lit up by the light spells at night had given it the name of Sparkling City by tourists. Yet there was no sign of light, and with it life. As far as the eye could see, the streets were dark. They had never been this dark before, not since the founding of the city. And then, as she put two and two together, everything suddenly clicked in her mind. The runes on the tome's cover had read, "The Book of the Dead." Ominous, but desperate times called for desperate measures, and so they had tried to decipher its contents. Even their best language deciphering spells could only say that it was about a spell that would synchronize the energies of an entire nation to allow the central caster to realize his wishes. But now, looking at the dead city before her, the girl realized how wrong they had been. For starters, the word synchronize was wrong. The word in question was gathering. It would gather the power of a nation. They had assumed energies was referring to mana, but in truth it was more like essential energies, namely those of life. But the spell's effects had been accurate. They would allow the caster to realize his wishes. After all, by turning him into one of the immortal undead, they would have all the time they needed to realize any wish they had. Eventually. Still, despite the terrible misunderstanding of the ritual and its effects, the Death Spiral spell had even accomplished its purpose of protecting the mage kingdom of Enmar from the wrath of the demon gods. What was dead could never die, after all. And as that realization hit her, Kino Fasref Inverun wailed her despair into the cold, unfeeling night.